Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
A fabulous free kick from Leighton Baines. Dawson, oh, what a finish from Glenn Dawson, it's 2-0. It's scored by Tim Cahill in injury time for Everton. Matheson, the 16-year-old, to Wilbraham, the 40-year-old. Stunning from James Rodriguez. And here into Henderson! And Ian Henderson, right on half-time.
Can I ask a question of you Rochdale lads as an outsider?
Absolutely.
To flip it back on Mark earlier. Because a couple of times you've mentioned about sections of your support perhaps getting on people's backs or voicing displeasure. And obviously, no disrespect, obviously, our Matthew plays for Rochdale and know a bit about the history of the club, and they've spent a lot of time in the bottom tier. And apart from the Keith Hill years when there was promotions and good football, it's been very much a bottom tier club. It surprises me, therefore, that a few, it sounds like the fans are getting on people's backs or not having the patience with the young players, young manager. How much of that is genuine anger and frustration, and how much is it perhaps of this performative display of displeasure amongst fans that I think is creeping into football a lot? I watch a lot of League Two because my girlfriend's a Bradford City fan, and they have a section, a new section of young lads who all wear Stone Island, all go and sing all the songs that they've heard on YouTube, and then get very angry very quickly when something goes wrong, and like, you're still Bradford City. Is there a bit of that going on?
I think there's a little bit of recency, to be honest. So you look at like the last 9-10 years are probably the most successful that we've ever had as a club, at least on a consistent basis. So fans who started supporting us then, obviously thankful for the support and it's great, but we've not always been at that level and we're not always going to be at that level. So I think that's point one. I think point two that you make around young fans coming in and generally just being a little bit annoyed with the world, and football is a chance for them to vent. I think there's definitely a bit of that. It's definitely more noticeable post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. I think social media is a little bit of an echo chamber, so you can get someone go on and go Stockdale out, 5 people go, oh yeah, I agree, and quite quickly it makes more noise than it should. So I think there's a few bits there, and I think if there's one call out I could make to anyone listening to this, go and do some reading in terms of what happened with Rochdale over the summer. I'm not saying where to go and look. There's various sources of that information, which is, for legal reasons, freely available online. But just go and do some reading and understand how close we were to not having a football club. Factor that in with we've not always been as successful as we have for the last 10 years. Factor that in with new manager at short notice. Couple that with new squad at really, really short notice. Add in a sprinkling of the average age of the team is like 21. Yes, it's frustrating when we're conceding ridiculous goals at home. We don't seem to know what to do with the throw-in. We're conceding last minute. We can't defend corners. We're running into blind alleys down the sides. Yes, that's frustrating. But I think for this season at least, we need to temper it a little bit with where could we have been, where we are, and actually what foundations we're putting in place now for future generations of Dale fans. Sorry, that turned into a bit of a rant, and I said I wouldn't do it.
No, you can rant.
That's where I think we are.
I think Jimmy's got something. Go on, Jim.
No, to extrapolate on what you've said, Mark, and this is going to be a bit of RC old man syndrome from me here. To bring up the point about younger supporters, I tend to find as well, not just with Rochdale, with Everton, but it seems to be fairly indicative of most football clubs now, and you see it on football Twitter is the biggest cesspool of anything ever. Like you say, it's a social media echo chamber. But just generally, if a team loses one game, it's like the end of the world now. Nobody of a certain generation could accept defeat anymore, because I don't know if it's because all these kids are playing FIFA and they're winning all the time because it's, or Football Manager, whatever, but it's not a computer game, it's a real life, it's careers, it's livelihoods, it's people's, families and everything, that they don't quite understand that's what get affected. And ultimately, at the end of the day, only one team can win a league. Only a handful out of 24 clubs, only 3, 4, whatever it is, can get promoted. Not everyone's going to win all the time. And sadly, I feel like we've had a generation, okay, with the pandemic and that, yes, they're frustrated. We're all bloody frustrated by it. But having seen the generation come through as a teacher, primary school, with participation trophies, everyone's got to win. They haven't learned the reality that there's winners and losers in life. Everyone kind of finds their level. This is getting really philosophical, and I do apologise, gents. But at the same time, it's not a case of accept where you are, but look, just go and enjoy support, being able to go out and support your team again, win, lose or draw. Just go and enjoy supporting your local team. You can't win all the time, and to expect that is completely unrealistic.
I think it's an interesting point. You look at, so we had a young lad for the Plymouth game who brought a drum. Like, I sit in the WMG, and yes, you laugh at the fact that there's a drum, but it's good that it was passionate enough and it got a bit of chanting going and stuff, and that's great. And as much as we can say the younger fans just want to win all the time and it's abusive if they don't, at the same time, some of the older fans need to be open to the change of, let's bring young people in and get them excited. So the Dale Trust have just done a drive to get, I think it's 100 Rochdale scarves to give to school kids at the match next Saturday. That's fantastic, and they're the future fans of the club. And it's where's that balance of how do we attract new fans into the club and young blood without diluting what Rochdale is about. When I started watching us, it was pretty miserable. But I got hooked on the live football, the pie and peas, like just the stuff that you don't really, results aren't as important at that age. And if we're not careful, I think we risk a toxic environment of young kids coming in, wanting to win all the time, expressing it badly and abusing the team. And then young kids coming in, dead positive, drums, chanting, running about, cheering. And the older fans abusing them for doing that. And I think, now I'm getting philosophical, you look at the Dale attendance, there's a very certain demographic of, it feels like the vast majority of people are 30, 35-year-old white males who aren't going to be around forever. And if we don't start attracting a broader demographic into the club, that being that different communities, being it women in football, which I know there's another podcast that are doing some great stuff with, be it kids coming in, if we don't start doing that, we will just continue to survive rather than thrive back to where we were a few years ago.
I feel like I'm slap bang in the middle of that. I started watching Dale when I was 10, and I'm a season ticket holder with my dad. He's in his mid-70s now, so he's been watching them 60 years. I've been watching them 30 years. I am about to start taking my toddler to see games, but I almost feel that there were nice eras. So my dad had a nice era, I've had a nice era of Rochdale. Hopefully my son, with the great work that the Trust have done, will also have a secure football club and a nice era to come into as well.
No, I totally agree. And I mean, that wasn't me picking on younger supporters. I mean, I can also make comparisons. I go and watch Tranmere Rovers a lot, and there's a lot of good young supporters coming through there. The local community do lots to bring in younger fans, which is brilliant. Local junior teams come and watch them with their coaches. And yeah, of course, get the young blood in. It's always important to reach out to as many different demographics as you can to boost your attendances. So you've got, the diehards that go home away, even kids that, their dads or mums or whoever are massive diehards. But then conversely, I coach football on a Saturday morning, and there's a lot of dads who are, say, Evertonians. and their kids are coming in from school singing the Mo Salah song, because football, and especially successful football, is readily available on television like 24/7. Whereas when we were kids, to be fair, yeah, we had like Sky and all that. But if you wanted to go and watch football on a Saturday, you didn't have like a live internet stream. You'd have to go down the ground invariably and watch it, and you enjoyed the experience, win, lose or draw. So I think I think it depends on the character of that particular person. Do they want instant gratification watching it on television, or do they want to feel more part of it and be involved at a club the way that Rochdale are doing, with the community stuff? So yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it, really?
So probably an open question then, gents. What is your first memory of going to a live football match, and what was it about that memory that hooked you on to keep going?
Watching Steve Whitehall in the pissing down rain. watching Stevie Whitehall in the pissing down rain, walking up and down Wilberts. It doesn't get any more any more basic than that.
See, I was a little bit young for Stevie Whitehall, but my dad used to go in the Sandy, and he still chants it now. He goes, Stevie Whitehall. So I was only like 6 or 5 or something, but I know all, from what my dad's told me,
I've funnily enough got 2 memories. I can't remember which comes first though. Must have been about 5 or 6, and the first one was, this is going to be blasphemous for an Evertonian, but it was actually a Tranmere v Liverpool friendly game. I think it was John Aldridge's testimonial. My dad took me to, even though he's a blue. And I seem to remember it being 2-2, but then turns out years later we left at half time and it was 4-4. But hey, but then my first Everton game was Everton Middlesbrough in 1996. We went 1 up. Michael Branch was the latest top prospect off the line, which says how long ago it was, and look what happened to him. Craig Short scored. We lost 2-1. Nick Barnby had a blinder and we signed him the week after. But I don't know what it was, because we lost. We were absolutely shit. But you were just hooked on the atmosphere and going the game. And I remember just turning to my dad and going, Dad, do something, as if my dad's going to suddenly, in his mid-40s, rock up in his shorts and his boots, full kit wanker, and just try and score a last-minute equaliser, But when you're 6, you don't know, do you? But no, I mean, that's what got me hooked, really, was just being there and experiencing it all.
Yeah, bit older probably than a lot of you. Like, I went to my first Everton game when I was 10, and it was my football coach at school. So the school, like one of the dads coached the football team, and he had a spare season ticket, or his mate's season ticket was on holiday. He said, "Well, why don't you come to Everton game with me? You like Everton?" And okay. And I liked Everton. They beat United in the FA Cup, and my family were United fans and from Warrington, so it's like in between. And Everton were my team, but I'd never been to Goodison, and I went to Goodison, and at 10 it was just an eye-opener. There was 40,000 in. We played Watford at home on April Fool's Day. I was in the park end, and it was near the back, but near the right towards the away fans in the Bullings Road end. And when you're 10 and you learn all these words, everyone's swearing, the chanting back and forth, and the smell of beer. Went in the pub before the game, and the lads had all sat around playing cards and that, and still smoking pubs, and was sat there. It's a whole atmosphere, and you felt really grown up probably. But yeah, I just loved it. It was a buzz, like I think Jimmy said about football was readily available on TV, and up until that point, the only live football I'd seen was my local team in Warrington. Me and my dad used to go on a Saturday and get in for free and just watch a team called Rylands, and there's just like a club. They had a cricket club and a rugby club and a bowling club. It's like a recreation club. So we'd go and watch the football, and it was like just 3 old men and me. Wayne Rooney's agent's now involved with that team. It's quite funny that they're up there, pushing for sort of football league status in a few years. So going to Goodison,
current FA Vars holders at the moment.
yeah, they're doing bits. They're doing lots of things. So going to a ground with 40,000 in, and it's a proper atmosphere, proper football. Yeah, I was just hooked. I wanted more and more. Yeah, it was just that. 10 years old, Watford at home, 4-2. We won. It was 3-2 up before 90 minutes, and the guy I went with always leaves 5 minutes early to beat the traffic. So I remember coming out of the park end, walking back to his car, and a big roar went up, and it was at 10. this is how clever I thought I was. I knew Everton had scored because it was too loud and raw to be the away fans. So I knew it was the home goal. And I think I've very rarely left a game early since then. I think that's ingrained in me that I'm scared of missing something.
Ash, mate, I was at that game as well.
Do you
I was at the exact game. Mark Hughes scored 2, I think. Mark Hughes scored 2, I think, didn't he?
Was Mark Hughes still there?
Seem to remember. I think Mark Hughes scored 2 in that game, won 4-2. My bad memory from that game, where you him up being around grown men and learning words, is the Park End started chanting the referee's a wanker. Now, I was about, 9? My brother about 6 or 7. And we suddenly stood up and went, the referee's a... And my dad looks like, no. And we go, Wally. Just like... So, but no, I remember that game really well. Unfortunately, the Watford game I most recently went to, I did leave 5 minutes early and missed the goal. But, hey-ho.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that. Not as happy memories this time round. But no, I was at that game, yeah. Was it Joe Max Moore or Mark Hughes? I can never remember. One of the others scored 2 goals.
I want to say Joe Max Moore. I remember, because I fell in love with Nick Barmby. I think the one thing, I don't know if it's good as...
Oh, yeah. Your brother's saying.
It must happen. It must happen at every ground. But Nick Barmby just turned and sprayed a pass about 20, 30, 40 yards just from centre midfield to right back and got like a round of applause from 3 sides of the ground. And I was like, oh, this crowd's well, we clap passes. How cultured are we? And I don't know if it happens everywhere. It probably does. But I always, to this day, Goodison still claps a 30-yard sideways ball to the right back from centre midfield. It just reminds me of that day, the first day at Goodison.
Yeah, we'll clap 30-yard balls and then we'll go mad for like an elbow in the face from centre forward. And then, God forbid there's a corner, the place just goes nuts. Obviously, I grew up watching Duncan Ferguson, so massive love, even now, massive love for him, except when he went to Newcastle, I was gutted. But yeah. That's a point then. Who's our first footballing heroes then? We all know yours is Beckham, Greg.
Yeah, like on an England level, but like Rochdale, I'd probably say like Paddy McCourt and Kevin Townsend. That's probably, obviously I'm 34, but that's about the time that I really got stuck into it all. So it's like definitely Paddy McCourt, and everyone, Mark and Dave will have seen him play for Dale. Kevin Townsend, Lee Machiavelli was in there as well. But I forgot to mention something. This is Ash mentioned something before, but you said your cousin played for Dale, didn't you, Ash? But he would have been in that team. But if you can explain for the listeners who your cousin was.
Yeah, so it was Matt Doughty, little left back with outrageous hair. He was in that Dale team that I think that featured around about the time of Gary Jones and Ricky Lambert and Adam LaFondra, I think was probably coming through. Possibly, did he play at the same time? There was a good core of players, I think, in that team. All round about the time he was there.
He was definitely there with Gary Jones, Paddy McCourt, a few others. Gosh, yeah. I don't remember it. Where did he go after Dale? Can you remember any? Was it Wrexham?
He went to Halifax. I think Dale were in League 2, Halifax were in the Conference. I think there was a bit of a... I don't want to say he left under a cloud. I think Steve Parkin didn't fancy him, didn't renew his contract. He was out of contract and unattached and signed for Hull.
I've got him up here. Sorry, I've got Chester, Rochdale, Accrington.
The Accrington thing...
Halifax.
Yeah, the Accrington one never came through. I think he'd agreed in principle and then...
really?
There was a bit of controversy, minor level controversy. He'd agreed in principle to sign for him, never did.
Oh, right.
Went to Halifax, then finished at Altrincham for a bit, and then Warrington Town and a few other places lower down.
Yeah, Witton Albion, Hyde, Trafford, there's a few. He's been a manager as well. Managed Altrincham briefly.
Gosh. Yeah, so my 3, I'd say, I mean, there have obviously been better players, but those are the 3 that got me hooked, like the years of Paddy McCourt, Kevin Townsend, Lee Machiavelli. I'd say it with those early on. Like I said, we've had some great players. Holty later on, a few years later, you were one of my favourites. But what about you, Dave? What would you say yours got you hooked? Oh, you said Stevie Whitehall, didn't you? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to show my age a little bit, and obviously it's nothing near what my dad will be able to recite. But I think the standout players for me were like Stevie Whitehall, Andy Flounders, Andy Milner. But I think the one that really sticks with me is Sean Reid. He could absolutely scratch holes in players, and I remember like towards the end of every game, he used to be the guy who'd take the ball into the corner, protect it, getting the minutes to go down on the clock. But he used to have like calves like dinner plates. He was built for breaking people in.
That's just a great description, isn't it?
Is that Peter Reid's brother?
It is.
It is, yeah. It is.
He's been a big supporter of stuff with the takeover attempts as well, to be fair, over the summer. He's been pretty vocal about his love for the football club, so always appreciated.
He's on Twitter and Facebook. I'm sure he's on the Dale appreciation thing. I'm sure I've seen him posting things on there, and I've not twigged that it's him, and I've read it and I've gone, oh, and then I've twigged that's Sean Reid.
And he came back for the 100 years in the Football League game as well. I think he was part of the walk around the ground.
He did. That was a good night. That was that Friday night, that one. It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The players, there were a few, like a bit of a celebration, somewhat, you could say, and they had loads of ex-Dale players were invited to do like a bit of a lap of honour. And I remember one point when they got nearer to the Sandy Lane, the sprinklers got a few of them, that were quite good. Like, I know Lee Machiavelli and Kevin Townsend got soaked a little bit. Yeah, just good to see. I mean, I think Gary Jones was there, but he's sort of hidden in the crowd of about 12 of them, what have you. So, but Jones is another one that we all love Gary Jones. I've got him on Facebook, which is a bit odd.
Gary Jones is still playing, you know.
Is he really? Where's he?
He's still playing.
Where?
He is playing for a club called Asheville, which is not far from where I live, in Wallasey. It's in the West Cheshire League Division 1, so about the 11th tier of English football. He still gets games for Asheville now. I could, in theory, go down that 10-minute drive from my house and watch Gary Jones play a game of football on Saturday.
Didn't he comment on one of your things on Facebook, Greg? I'm pretty sure you put a photograph on it, and he said, "Oh, there's me with her." I was like, "Oh, all right, Greg."
I don't know, he just came on my you might know, the list of you might know this person. It says that G.J. Jones. Was like, I do know him. I just thought, I'm going to add him. I've not spoke to him, but he liked, I've put a header photo of Gary Jones, Kevin Townsend and Grant Holt, and he commented on it, but I was like, bloody hell, Gary Jones. I was like, yeah. Oh, everyone loves Jonesy. I went to, a couple of years ago now, we had like a Gary Jones, like a night, at the Ratcliffe Arms, like a meal and then a night with Gary Jones. That was bloody brilliant. We've done a few of them, but we need more of those, just of the old, well, any of the old great players that we've had. I think we've had a Holty one. Grant Holt did one, didn't he, a few years ago? Gary Jones did. Yeah, that'd be good. Get a few more of them, of the old stories, and because obviously we get to hear about them on podcasts, and that's about it really. Like obviously the Rochdale AFC. They've got some cracking ones. They've had Lee Machiavelli. I think they've had Adam Rundle recently. That was quite good.
Yeah, Rundle one was absolutely brilliant.
It was unbelievable. I'll try and send it to you, Jim. I know obviously you don't follow Dale, but some of the stories were just spot on.
Well, I've heard Joey Thompson on Under the Cosh. That was a really good podcast.
Mark, with the fair game side that you're involved in, a lot of people might not know what you're involved in, but if you could just give us a bit more information.
Yeah, so essentially Fair Game is an organisation of currently 34 clubs who are looking at protecting the football pyramid, if you like, in the UK. So it's looking at things like redistribution of wealth. So at the minute you have the team that gets relegated, bottom place from the Premier League, gets 55 million in one parachute payment. Leagues 1, 2, Women's Super League, and then 3 or 4 non-league leagues as well get the same amount distributed between them. That just doesn't feel fair, and the incentive is clearly there for clubs to spend money they don't have to chase that promotion at all costs, because the money then becomes worth it. There's various things around owners of clubs being the custodian of a club rather than the sole owner. So one of the things that Fair Game looks at is how do we protect a football club as a community asset. So how do we keep the stadium in the club's hands, and how do we keep it in that locality? How do we keep the name of the club, nickname of the club, club colours, all that kind of stuff within fan control? How do we reward clubs for being run sustainably? So from a equality, equity and diversity point of view, from a financial sustainability, from an academy point of view. So how do we reward clubs for doing the right things in the pyramid to keep the integrity of competition within UK football? So we saw with the Super League breakaway just how much resentment there was even from fans of those big clubs, and how do we keep that from happening again? And then for those that haven't seen it, Tracy Crouch, an MP, has done an independent review into football and protecting that football pyramid. And I think one of the stats that come out of that is within the Fair Game manifesto, we made 47 recommendations of what we would like to see for football moving forward. And 28 of those 47 were directly covered within Tracy Crouch's review, so we're clearly on the same line. So we're now working with the AFL, with 34 clubs at the minute, soon to be more, in terms of how do we keep driving that forward, and how do we keep football fair, sustainable, equitable and competitive. And I think any true football fan would be after those same things.
And surely the only people that are currently arguing against that are the people up at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah, when you look at various people from within the Premier League coming out and comparing it to like Chairman Mao, you have to question like what points of reference they're using. So within the Fair Game manifesto, we're not asking for more money to be distributed from the Premier League. We're asking for the same amount of money to be distributed more fairly and on a more sustainable basis, and for the share of any future revenue, so from other TV streams or online streams, to also be distributed to the same degree. Because without clubs in the lower leagues, you don't have that funnel of talent and that competitiveness. So you look at Rochdale, where we've had like Holt, Gilks, Lafondra, Lambert, to name a few, Murray, who've gone through. Premier League clubs wouldn't have benefited from their talent without them being given the opportunity at a club like Rochdale. And if clubs like Rochdale cease to exist, like Bury and Macclesfield, or are run unsustainably, like Derby, and to a lesser degree Bolton and Wigan, to be fair, the incentive isn't there for clubs in the lower leagues to develop that talent to sell it through. The incentive is there instead to throw money at players already established, and that talent pipeline dries up quite quickly.
No, I think you saw it with the England squad in the Euros. Obviously, we all know what happened there. And I think every single player, bar possibly Declan Rice, had a connection with an EFL club. I think the EFL may have even put like a map of the UK up with all the different players, where they'd hailed from, the clubs they'd started at. And it's such a massive, massive thing to have that pyramid, basically. I mean, I know myself as a grassroots coach that even little ones, Liverpool will come looking at my little ones, and I'll always say to parents, look, it's great, they want that, but if, say, a Tranmere, a Wrexham, a Chester gets involved, round our way, that's going to give those children far more of a chance of making it than going right to the very top, because they'll churn up and spit out young players just as and when they've got that much money. And I think it's so important for the pathway of young men and women in this country that we have clubs right the way through the system, and it needs to be much more sustainable, because the money at the top's obscene, and the money at the bottom, as we're seeing with some poorly run clubs, but also some clubs that have just fallen on hard times, the pandemic, it's absolutely atrocious that you could give away some players' weekly wages for a week to save some football clubs, and as we saw with Bury and Macclesfield, like you say. So it needs to be a lot fairer than it is.
And it's an interesting point with the players. Obviously, academies is a big part of the manifesto, but one of the things that Tracy Crouch didn't pick up on in her review, or certainly didn't make a recommendation on, was the football creditors rule. So for those that aren't aware of the football creditors rule, if a club goes into admin after financial difficulty, part of the EFL guidance or rules at the minute is that a football creditor, so a player, an agent, a manager, they will get paid 100% of what they are owed once that club is bought out of admin. So say that club is bought out of admin for 100 grand, and players, agents, managers total 85 grand of that. That 85 grand is ring fenced and given to them at 100% of what they're owed. The remaining 15% then goes to everybody else, be that the government, be it HMRC, be it Bob the Builder who went and fixed the plumbing a couple of times, be it the groundsman, whatever. And it's those small people who then might get paid 5 or 10 pence in the pound who suffer because the football creditors get that first bite of the cherry. So you look at some of the local examples, and I'm going to use Bury, nothing against them, because I think most of their fans know where they went wrong at this point, or you would hope they did. But they were signing players they couldn't afford with the crowds and the money that they had, and the players had no reason to say no to going to them, because they knew that if that level of debt was unsustainable, when the club was bought, they would still get paid at full whack. That doesn't support that talent pipeline, development of the pyramid, competitiveness. So I think although Tracy Crouch has done amazing work, the EFL are listening, they're now talking with Fair Game and we're working with them. I think there are still a couple of bits where we could look even further into it to protect that integrity of competition. Greg, you look shocked at that football creditor rule piece.
Sorry, I just unmute myself. Well, it's just information that I'm not savvy to sometimes. And obviously, you can read articles and things like that, but when you start having a conversation about it with somebody who obviously that you know more about these problems in the football pyramid, it only just becomes clear. You know, it's only through conversations that you see the odd thing online, but it's not really out there that much, is it? Is this a bit of a shock to everyone else, Jim? Like, is this something that you're not really familiar with in terms of? Yeah, it sort of is out there, but I wasn't aware of quite a lot of that, actually.
Aware of bits of it. I mean, I think I've name dropped him a few times when all the stuff was going on with Barry in particular. I know Joe Murphy's lad came to football, so we had a lot of chatting with him. So we got a bit of an idea. Obviously, he couldn't say too much, but an idea of how much money was owed and how much money Barry were basically in the shit, and how long they had to sort of pay it back, and it sounded pretty horrific. So it doesn't shock me when you look at the amount of money going out the game and agents' fees at the top level, the amount of money leaving the game in just crazy ways. It doesn't shock me that this is a rule at all, considering the amount of problems that so many clubs have got themselves into in the last few years.
I think one of the reasons I got involved in Fair Game is because it hits home over the summer with Rochdale, just how easy it would be for people who maybe didn't have the best intentions of a football club to come and get involved, and some of the words that have been bandied around like asset stripping, for example, and some of the characters that were rumoured to be involved. So that's why I got involved. I think it's scary. I would encourage anybody who's got an interest to look at fairgameuk.org. There's a full manifesto and a breakdown on there. And this isn't slating anybody. This isn't saying we're not grateful for the money we get from the Premier League or anything like that. It's more about it needs to be a two-way relationship of how do we work with the Premier League as the EFL and lower leagues to distribute that wealth better, to incentivize clubs to be better run, and reward clubs who do the right things rather than chasing the dream that they might never get to. Because you look at what happened in Bury and Macclesfield, it decimated the town centres for a long time. Clubs are community assets, owners are custodians, and when people forget that, particularly in the lower leagues, you're in dangerous territory, and it can have a real effect on people, fan base, and the local community.
I think you touched on, Mark, what had happened to Rochdale, and I think even as Rochdale fans, we kind of watched what had unfolded at Bury. Certainly not in a smug back seat, but we as Rochdale fans had kind of seen it maybe a long time before some of the fans that chose not to see it. But then you look at what happened to Rochdale, or what almost happened to Rochdale. We were all aware and all had our eyes open, but it still nearly happened. We were still very close to it happening. So it just goes to show, no matter how savvy and on the ball you are, it will happen or can happen to your club. And let's face it, Rochdale, not the most attractive of assets to strip. There wasn't a lot there to start off with, but it just goes to show if there are unsavoury characters wanting to do it to a club like Rochdale, well, I mean, who's next?
I think it's a fair point, and I think the phrase is there, but for the grace of God go we. It was to people who are listening to this who might have known about the hostile takeover but didn't understand it. We were literally hours away from losing the club. Matt Southall now appears to be involved from day one, like back in April before it was even common knowledge. You look at what he did at Charlton and what he could have done at Rochdale, despite us seeing what happened to Bury, it could very nearly have happened. One of the key things within Fair Game is the owners and directors test, so an enhanced version of that, so much stricter, looking at ultimate source of funds rather than a front source of funds. One of the things is if you have a criminal record, you would not be allowed to be a director of a football club. I believe that would rule Matt Southall out of any future clubs moving forward. So just these really simple, common sense things, to be fair, that are coming from experts and fans of clubs could make a huge difference, rather than us being told what to do by people who maybe haven't followed or been involved in non-league football. Listening to the pyramid to safeguard the pyramid feels like a common sense, sensible approach.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. Sorry to bring up a question, but what is it you know about the current fit and proper person test then? Because I remember watching a video about the decline of Portsmouth. Obviously, it's been well documented over the last decade or so, and how rumoured one of their owners from the Middle East was allegedly potentially not even real. It was just a front for like previous owners to make their way back in. So I don't know how much you know, how much you can say, but it seems to me like with all the dodgy owners that have come into football in the last couple of decades, that it's obviously not a system that works or a test that really filters out the wheat from the chaff.
So I'm going to caveat this with, this is my view, not the view of Fair Game, just so I don't get in any trouble. I think you look at one of the people who was heavily involved with Morton House, the company that was due to be taken over at Rochdale. One of the people had zero digital footprint at all. Like, you just could not find him online. Like, there was nothing, which is unusual in this day and age. Another one of the people, you couldn't find anything online, but his name had two separate spellings in the UK dictionary. So there was one way of spelling it with a C and one with an S. At Company's House, he was spelt with a C. If you look for the guy but spell it with an S, you find out the address is the same as on Company's House. We believe he's a store manager at a well-known big book retailer, the Laminated Book of Dreams for Bill Bailey fans. And from what you can see with freely available information online, he wouldn't be a man who could put £1.2 million into a takeover of a football club. But the fit and proper test would look at limited company. These people, it's backed up on Company's House. They've never been involved in a bankruptcy or in another football club before. There's probably nothing saying, please don't get involved. The only reason Rochdale survived a lot of it is because what had actually happened was the previous directors had agreed to sell their shares to these new people, totaling more than 30%, without telling the EFL first. The EFL consider 30% a controlling stake, and it was at that point the EFL could get involved and say, actually, we need to investigate you further, and you've breached the rule by not telling us at this point. If there had been 4 people buying 12.5% each, all with slightly different spellings of the same name, there is nothing to say, as long as you couldn't prove they were a consortium, there is nothing to say they couldn't get control of a football club, in my opinion. We were very, very close. Very close.
I don't think it's quite out there, is it? Obviously, in terms of it is to the community of Rochdale and maybe a few other fans, but
we're talking literally several hours one Sunday afternoon where one shareholder understood the significance of the shares that he owned and thankfully chose not to sell to these people. There is a community of Rochdale fans who have fought tooth and nail, done ridiculous investigations, too many to thank, to be honest, to keep this from happening. I would encourage anybody who is interested to know more to Google Rochdale AFC hostile takeover, to have a look at, I think there's a Twitter account, Dale Not For Sale. There's a lot of detail on there. But for anyone who is interested in Rochdale Football Club, for anyone who is interested in just how close a relatively well-run, not particularly glamorous or successful lower league football club in England can come to being taken over by people who don't have the best interests of the football club at heart, just go and have a read, and I think that will encourage you to support change in the game to make sure it can't happen again.
I think if you look at some of the reaction from, was it the Charlton fans, as soon as they realised that Matt Southall was involved, some of their outpouring of opinions and love for Rochdale, I think, it's quite taken aback, just how they were interested as well.
Yeah, and let me be clear, right? Rochdale clearly need investment as a club, and I don't think we're ever going to say, please don't give us money to people. But it needs to be people who are prepared to invest because they're a fan of the club and they have essentially spare money, or because they don't expect a return on it imminently, because you're not going to get that. You can't plough 1.2 million into Rochdale Football Club, especially when you're not linked to the club in any discernible way, and expect to get any positive outcome of that anytime soon. It's just not going to happen. So yes, we need investment. I think the share issue has been fantastic. The work the trust have done to buy shares has been fantastic. People's generosity, brilliant. I know the club are looking at more commercial income streams. Fantastic, because we need the revenue. But as a general rule, if it looks too good to be true,
probably is.
It probably is. Yeah.
Speaking of too good to be true, then, I mean, it's just come to mind now. Obviously, talking about ownership models and safeguarding the prospect and future of the club. Obviously, I watch quite a bit of German football, and obviously over there, barring a couple of energy drink owned clubs, shall we say, that give you wings, the 50+1 rule. I don't know what your thought is on that, whether it's just more of a pie in the sky thing here, or it doesn't quite translate as well as it sounds, whereby the fans always own 51% of the club and, you know, have elections every few years and so on. I don't know whether that's quite how you see club ownership in this country going forward, not necessarily just Rochdale, but, you know, as a general rule, or whether you think now, especially at the top level, it's not going to happen because the amount of multi-billionaire oligarchs and sheikhs that own football clubs, it's never likely to go back from that.
As a model, it clearly works. You look at what they do in Germany, you could go and see a top flight game in Germany for 15 quid consistently. That clearly works. I don't know if football in the UK is too far gone for that, and I'm definitely not qualified to make an assumption on it. I'm going to talk about Rochdale again because it's what I'm close to, but we now have over 500 individual shareholders who own, I think the trust is the biggest shareholder at like 14-15% of the club, I think. The rest of it is owned by fans, some of who were all like offered 4, 5, 6 times market value of their shares to sell to Morton House in the summer But because those shares were a legacy from grandparents, parents, whatever, or because they're fans of the club, they weren't going to let them go into the wrong hands. So I don't know if the 50+1 rule works, or if it's so cliche talking about Rochdale, but the cooperative approach works in terms of if someone wanted to come in and take over Rochdale, you would have to probably buy shares off at least 100 people, I would guess, to get a majority at this point. It becomes a lot harder for anybody to do wrong by the club with a majority stake. And I think one thing I would say is that a strong supporters trust like we have, who can consistently hold the board of directors to account, even when the board we've got now are brilliant people, the Dale fans, the business people, they're doing all the right things. But we have a trust that if it starts to go wrong, we'll hold them to account. I think that's probably a good middle ground in UK football of not quite 50+1 and not quite the oligarch ownership either, somewhere in the middle. I think where we are feels about right for me at this point.
And I think when us Dale fans are focusing on the results, I think it's a stark reminder if we look at the board that we did have this time last year, or slightly before, the Bottomley et al. And we look at the board that we do now with Simon and co. I mean, let's just be realistic for a minute and look at that success. Look at the great work that the Trust have done. Look at the great work that the board have done in opening up that honesty and two-way conversation. And let's just see out the rest of the season and make sure that we stay in the Football League.
I think from the previous board saying we need to be better at communicating to the new board communicating are two very different things. And to echo what Dave just said there, I think where we are to where we were, miles further ahead, in my opinion.
Everything seems a bit more fresh. I don't know what I mean by that quite really, but communication levels, friendliness, everything like that. And he seems to be on Twitter and Facebook, Simon, and he's out openly answering questions from fans about something and blah blah blah. He doesn't seem to be hiding away from anything. I know that sounds unusual, but it seems like a great guy. I haven't met him yet. Obviously, a few of us are around the club and go to the games, but I'm sure we will do eventually at some point. But yeah, I think Dave's right about the results. We have to look at what the bigger picture was, keeping the club in the division and keeping the club really, and not being similar to what happened to Bury. It's difficult to put into a few sentences for people that don't know, but that's exactly what it was really.
I think I would say I've always been proud to be a Rochdale fan, right? Since started supporting when I was 9, 10, I've always been proud to be a Dale fan. I was at high school when other lads were wearing United shirts and then came back in September wearing Chelsea shirts, and I was still there in my little Keytech or Carcraft Rochdale shirt, whatever. I've always been proud to be a Dale fan because I'm a Dale fan. I'm now proud to be a Dale fan because of what we've achieved over the summer and what I think we stand for moving forward, and that's a really good place to be.
Absolutely spot on. Absolutely. I feel like we've left Ash for a while here now. Sorry, Ash, but just to end, we're going to finish in a few minutes because I realise it's getting quite late. But just a question for you, Ash, that I forgot to ask you before, and Jimmy can chip in if you want. The results haven't been that great at the moment for Everton. Obviously, you beat Arsenal the other Monday. Is there a certain, how long would you give Rafa in his reign as Everton manager? Is there anything?
Can we go back to talking about the good stuff Mark's doing and Fair Game are doing and something positive? It's a tough one, and it comes back to what we were saying earlier about who else is, and you can't just not sack a manager because there might not be anyone else. If the manager needs sacking, they need sacking. And there's been occasions, Martinez, Silva, Christ, Aldice should never been appointed in the first place. But there's been occasions at Everton, I'm sure you guys have seen it at Rochdale, Keith Hill towards the end probably wasn't wanted by a large section of the fan base. If there comes a point he needs to be sacked, then they need to be sacked. For me, it isn't now, and it's because I don't think there's anyone else who could do any better. But there is just such a toxicity around the club, and as Jimmy said earlier, the fan base is divided. Away fans are always worse than home fans, I think, or worse or better, or or more extreme. So the away end at Palace was openly anti-Benitez and anti-Liverpool songs aimed at him, anti-personal songs aimed at him. I don't think it's got that level at Goodison yet. I think at the derby, most people just walked out and were singing "Sack the Board." I just find it hard because we're constrained by financial fair play, we're constrained by injuries. I don't think Rafa Benitez is the biggest problem at Everton Football Club, and I think there's bigger problems that need sorting out before that. And the problem we have is, if we sack him, the same manager who hired Benitez, the same owner or chairman who hired Benitez, who hired Silva, who hired Allardyce, who hired Coleman, who've hired the last string of managers, will hire the next one. And then where do we go from there? And I can't answer your question, Greg, because I don't know. I don't know how long I'd personally give Benitez, because I don't know how bad things can get yet. If they get to the point where it's literally riots on the pitch, then obviously for the sake of unity and they need to get rid. But the issues will still be there, and I think they need sorting out before anyone is hired or fired, I think.
I think backing up Ash really is that I can't really comment on how long we should give Rafa, because I don't think the board know how long they want to give Rafa. I will say though that I agree that Rafa is not the biggest issue at Everton Football Club. I think the fact that there was talk of a walkout on 27 minutes the other day, or the other game, against Arsenal, because we've not had a major trophy or any trophy for 27 years, which, okay, it's all respective when you look at Rochdale's situation, you look at the level that a lot of clubs have been at, but for a club like Everton to not won an FA Cup or a major trophy for 27 years is the longest drought in the club's history when you've been operating at the top table of English football for, more than any other club. The most seasons in top flight football of any English club, which does surprise people. The biggest problem though is look who's overseen large periods, about 27 years. Yes, Bill Camray saved us from Peter Johnson in the late 90s, but we've been stuck in this old boys sort of jobs, the boys kind of mediocrity since, giving ex-players coaching roles at the club like Jose Baxter and Francis Jeffers, who have got absolutely no credentials at all other than they played for the club years ago and weren't even that great. It's that romantic view that Kenwright has, almost like a Hollywood film or a West End play. He treats the club like that at times, and even re-signing Rooney was part of that. We need to be, I don't want to say more ruthless, but we need to stop harking on to what was, 20, 30, 40 years ago as this grand old team, as the song goes. You play in the ground every single time, and actually look at what we are now and go, right, how do we build for now? How do we look to clubs like, for example, West Ham, Leicester? Yes, clubs in theory that are arguably smaller than Everton, but are doing a whole lot better than we are, because they're not being stuck on what they were. They're now building for what the future, and that has to come with the new stadium, whatever that may be. But in the immediate future, I just can't answer what's going to happen with Rafa or with anyone really.
Just two quick notes before we finish. I just want to congratulate the Rochdale AFC podcast for winning the Northwest Podcast of the Year, which is Dean, Chaff and a few others. They are one of the ones that sort of inspired us, really, because we started this during lockdown, Jimmy, myself and Matt. So they have actually inspired us to do our own. And there's just one more point as well. One of the lads who came on one of the early podcasts, Adam, one of the Man United fans, he's not been too well at the moment. He's not been having a great time. So we just want to wish him all the best and make sure that he can get back to a good health level, shall we say. So I'd just like to thank everyone for popping on tonight. Thank you, Mark, Ash, Dave, thank you for coming on, and Jimmy, as always. And just thanks to the listeners for tuning in. I'm going to try and chop this into 2 episodes, probably on Thursday. So thank you, everybody.
Cheers for having us.
Cheers,
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Is this where if I press the big red button, it all gets cancelled? And it never happened.
Sports Social Podcast Network.